So I don't know how many people have been kind of paying attention to what's been going on with these sovereign citizens lately, particularly these guys, the Moors, which to me sort of came out of nowhere. I've never heard of them, and if anybody watching this or listening to this has, please send me a message on Twitter. Because when I usually think of sovereign citizens, which is exactly what these Moors are, although I don't think that they like that label, sovereign citizen, this is usually what I'm thinking of. So, I mean, you just get the sense that they're people who are from rural areas, usually white, have a beef up against the government in that they feel that the government doesn't have the right to tax, they're tyrannical, the government is, the president, this scene opened, or at least the part that I clicked to had opened to the woman talking about Obama being not a citizen, conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff. But in my mind, the singular thing that was unique about sovereign citizens, in my mind, is that they were mostly white people. White people who had a grievance against the government and decided to do, and were basically domestic terrorists to some extent. I mean, the Terry Nichols, who we know was connected to was an ally of and connected to Timothy McVeigh, who destroyed the Oklahoma, bombed the Oklahoma federal building. He was, in essence, a sovereign citizen. This is from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and this is the Patriot movement. He was one of these patriots. And it says here, Terry Nichols, who will one day be convicted of conspiracy, which he has already and has been in jail, I think, 20-some plus years. Conspiracy in the Oklahoma City bombing, renounced his U.S. citizenship, saying he follows the common law, indicating his early participation in the Patriot movement. And we've seen more and more of this stuff with respect to the so-called patriot movements and patriotism and all of these kinds of things. And it's happened, I'm not going to blame this on Trump, but it is certainly something that Trump has used and that his base has used very much to affect, to garner votes, to gain influence, to gain interested parties, to make money. The Conservative Party, the Republican Party, this guy Lynn Wood, who's a lawyer, he looks like he's one of these folks. So does all of these guys who are around Trump. And some of these people are at very high places in the government. This is another video from Vice. Vice has done some very good work on this. This is another video from Vice. Talking more about the sovereign citizen movement and exactly what it is they're about. That point about fascism, I think, is really important because I've been getting a little bit irritated with the media calling what Donald Trump is and what he does Trumpy. It isn't Trumpy. There is no such thing as Trumpy. What it is fascism. This is American fascism. And until the media really gets it and begins to understand and appreciate this, that what we're dealing with is fascism come to America, we are going to continue to sit back and have these people sort of to some extent be minimized, be sort of downplayed until it's going to be too late. This is something that everybody needs to sort of get involved with and really begin to take hold of. But there's another article that is interesting, I thought, and I came across this. I've never heard of the newspaper or the option. It's an op-ed in the Kansas Reflector, and it makes this other connection. It makes this line between McVeigh and Donald Trump and his movement. And it says, when Timothy McVeigh made the bomb that would take down the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City in 1995, he did it in plain sight at a state park in Kansas. McVeigh and at least one co-conspirator, Terry Nichols, mixed 4,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate, a common fertilizer, with diesel fuel and loaded the barrels in the back of a rented Ryder truck while it was parked in Gary State Fishing Lake. The location was convenient because McVeigh knew the area, having been stationed at Fort Riley before being discharged in 1991. McVeigh, 26, was decorated veteran of the First Gulf War, a combat infantryman who left the Army after washing out of Ranger School. And it goes on to talk about the bomb. It says, Nichols was McVeigh's old Army buddy and partner on the gun show circuit, who had purchased a white frame house in South 2nd Street in Harrington, less than 20 miles away from Gary Lake. McVeigh rented the Ryder truck from a body shop in Junction City. The bomb exploded at 9:02 a.m. Wednesday, April 19th. The federal building was filled with hundreds of people. The blast killed 168, including 6 children. It remains the worst act of domestic terrorism in American history. There is a direct line between the Oklahoma City bombing and the January 6th insurrection. The belief that drove McVeigh and his co-conspirators, who saw themselves as patriots, are chillingly similar to those that propelled the Capitol insurrectionists, who see themselves as patriots. So, I tend to agree with this idea that there is a connection, there is a symmetry between what they were trying to do, what McVeigh and Nichols actually succeeded in doing, which was an attack on the federal government. Attacking a federal building is an attack on the federal government. And January 6th, which attacking the Capitol building was an attack on the federal government as well. So there is a symmetry. And again, it is about hatred of government, distrust of government. You add the vaccines, you add the Facebook, Twitter stuff, you add Republicans like Ron Johnson and the rest of them. You add this whole, and it becomes a powder keg. This is what they're talking about in terms of using diesel fuel and ammonium nitrate is one type of explosion. This stuff with disinformation, with senators pushing this stuff, with the brokenness of government not to do anything about it, being wishy-washy on this, the president of the United States somewhat supporting this kind of stuff, the mandates, all of this stuff is a different type of, but a similar type of powder keg type of explosion waiting to happen. But so that's these guys, and I don't want to say that the sovereign citizens I'm talking about are like these guys, like the Patriot movement and these. However, they might be as bad or just as bad, not in terms of an attack on the federal government, but disrupting daily lives and disrupting people's lives in that sense. Again, I don't believe that a black group will have the kind of resonance that a white one will have because of the power dynamic, because of racism, because of these kinds of things that will prevent, the government will not stand by and allow a group that is composed of mostly blacks be a threat to the government. I mean, it's just never happened. Never happened. The federal government comes down hard on those groups, whereas the Oath Keepers, whereas the Patriot, these Patriot movements, whereas these militia movements, whereas the Proud Boys, whereas these other groups, the Ku Klux Klan, have never seen the full weight and force of the federal government come down on them like that. So, I mean, there is a racial aspect to this. However, it's important because this is a group that we still don't know what they're up to. And I am surprised to some extent at how much they have been under the radar, but they have been around for quite a while. But in case anyone has missed this was somewhat of a big story. I remember reading about it, hearing about it. This was a big story a few months ago, where the Moors sort of made it to the front page of the news. This is from a local station. I think it's the NBC local affiliate, if I'm not mistaken. Take a look at this. I'll talk about it some more.
This morning, Mass State Police are identifying several of the 11 suspects from the Wakefield standoff. This is video from Live Boston, as you can see, showing one of the suspects getting arrested. The men range in age from 17 years old all the way up to 40. They're from Rhode Island, New York, and Detroit. All 11 men are facing gun-related charges, and some are not telling police who they are because of their beliefs and connection to the group Rise of the Moors. NBC 10's Katie Brace has the new information from overnight.
Two men in camo appeared calm as police arrested them. Live Boston captured these moments that ended a 9-hour standoff.
Looked out the window, saw a man in full tactical gear. It was definitely terrifying.
Amelia Isabel lives right next to 95 North in Wakefield, where the manhunt and standoff began around 1:30. A state trooper saw two vehicles in the breakdown lane with hazard lights flashing and went to help. He saw the men were armed and wearing military-style clothes.
Tactical vests, body-worn cameras. Some had slung long rifles, some had sidearms, pistols, some had a combination of both.
When asked, the group said they didn't have driver's or firearms licenses available. The trooper called for backup. Several of the men ran into the woods with their weapons. A massive number of police responded, including the FBI. The SWAT team set up a perimeter and started searching.
If we hear or if we see the cops starting to run towards the woods, I'm grabbing the baby and you're grabbing the boy, and we are going downstairs in the basement.
She, along with other residents in the nearby Wakefield and Reading neighborhoods, were told to shelter in place. 95 through Wakefield was shut down. Police arrested two of the men fairly quickly. Negotiators reached out to the rest who were in their vehicles and in the woods.
A variety of, not demands, but requests that they just be allowed to leave the area, transit the area without any accountability.
The men identified themselves as members of the Rise of Moors, a group that believes in sovereign rights. They said they were traveling from Rhode Island to Maine for tactical training. Mid-morning, police tightened the perimeter using these Bearcats. The men peacefully surrendered.
State and local police officers deserve a great deal of credit for getting what could have been a very, very dangerous situation to a safe ending.
And Governor Baker did tweet about Saturday's standoff. He says, "Thank you to the Mass State Police for their work in safely and efficiently de-escalating a potentially dangerous situation. We are grateful to our law enforcement officials and first responders every day for protecting our communities." And the state police mentioned the men identified themselves as part of a group called the Rise of the Moors. Now, experts say it's a sovereign citizen movement that tends to operate outside of U.S. laws. So we talked to former FBI agent Ken Gray and former state trooper Todd McGee. Now, Gray says the group abides by a bogus treaty between the United States and Morocco.
No such treaty existed, but they claim that there was a treaty that allowed them to operate in the country without being citizens of the country.
Sovereign citizens are anti-government. They do not recognize the laws of the land. The Rise of the Moorish, or the Moorish group, is a offset or a subgroup of sovereign citizen ideology.
And the 11 members of this group, Rise of the Moors, will be arraigned in court on.
So this thing could have gotten really bad. This could have really gone bad. And I mean, it shows to a good extent that law enforcement are able to and are capable of arresting people, black people, and not killing them. And I think that, these guys were loaded. Their cars were loaded up with guns. And yet they were able to take everybody in peacefully. Everybody surrendered. People did not, try and become a hero or try to do anything crazy. And I think that this is further evidence that it is possible to have good law enforcement go out, do their thing, and be able to, bring people in and save people's lives and still protect the community. But this thing could have been really, really, really bad. And I think it's both the police and these guys, these Moors, both kept a level head. And even though they tried this long standoff, they didn't take hostages, they didn't try to shoot at the cops, they didn't try to do a lot of stuff that could have made this thing go sideways. So credit to the police, definitely, and thank God that this thing did not go badly. But this Moors, again, it's to a good extent fascinating to me. Some of these beliefs and some of these systems that are around, particularly with respect to the Moors. And I pulled up something. This is from the Southern Poverty Law Center, where they sort of go into a little bit of the Moors. And I encourage people to go to Southern Poverty Law Center to take a look at it. The Moorish Sovereign Citizen Movement is a collection of independent organizations and lone individuals that emerged in the early 1990s as an offshoot of the anti-government sovereign citizen movement, which believes that individual citizens hold sovereignty over and are independent of the authority of the federal government and state governments. Members of the Moorish sovereigns, called Moors, have come into conflict with federal and state authorities over their refusal to obey laws and government regulations. Recently, Moorish sovereign citizens have engaged in violent confrontations with law enforcement. They have also been known to retaliate against government authorities through financial means, a process called paper terrorism. Moorish sovereigns espouse an interpretation of sovereign doctrine that African Americans constitute an elite class within American society with special rights and privileges that convey on them a sovereign immunity, placing them above and beyond federal and state authority. So, again, not uncommon, as we saw in that Vice video. This is something that, and you hear a lot of people who are libertarians. You sort of hear the same kind of, there is a strain of this kind of stuff in libertarianism, which I think is more, Rand Paul, who's in Congress. He is supposedly a libertarian, and his father, Rand Paul. You get the sense of, and you hear a lot of the sense of, the oppressive government and to be free of government oppression. And two of the things that connect them all is the desire not to pay taxes. Wow, what a surprise. So that was this incident fairly recently. I want to play a video. These are two videos, and this is, one video is from CBS This Morning from back in 2018, and it goes into a Moors, a different Moors situation that happened in 2018. And then I'm going to talk about something that just happened just like a few weeks ago with respect to the Moors. So they're making their way into the news, whether they like it or not. But these are two of the same similar incidents that happened, but at different times recently.
You may not have heard of the Moorish Nationals, but police have members claim to follow Moorish science. It comes from a black religious group that's been around for nearly a century. Most of its members obey the law, but not everyone. Chip Reed looks at how some use their religion to justify the crime.
This 35,000 square foot mansion in an exclusive corner of Bethesda, Maryland, has 12 bedrooms, 17 bathrooms, and trees planted by President Clinton and Vice President Gore. On the market for nearly $6 million, it's not exactly a steal. So imagine real estate agent Jordan Feinberg's surprise when he learned someone had moved into the vacant property.
The owner calls me again and says, the neighbor called, there are people inside the house claiming they own the house. And I'm like, what?
Lamont Butler, a.k.a. Lamont Maurice L., claimed the mansion for himself. He even provided documents issued by the so-called Moorish National Republic to back it up.
It's a burglary in the purest sense.
Across the country, Butler and many other self-styled Moorish nationals have laid claim to property and status they say is lawfully theirs because their ancestors were here first. In Memphis, Tennessee, Tabitha Gentry staked a claim on this $3 million foreclosed home using heavy chains. Charged with trespassing, burglary, and theft, Gentry, who prefers the name Abka Ray Bey, says as a citizen of the Moorish American National Republic, that land is her land. And this man was arrested by police in Fayetteville, North Carolina, for interfering with a stolen car investigation. But his wife claims the arrest was illegal because he is a member of the Moorish nation.
He had diplomatic immunity. Why are y'all doing this?
Moors trace their beliefs to Noble Drew Ali, who founded the Moorish Science Temple in Chicago in 1925. With tens of thousands of followers, the faith borrows heavily from Islam. It also teaches that all black Americans are Moorish Americans, descendants of an ancient Moroccan global empire, an idea some followers have taken one step further.
So you don't have to get a license plate or a driver's license. You can lay claim to property.
Spencer Dew, who studies the movement, says Moorish Americans have long taken pride in being American citizens, but as the group splintered over the decades, some offshoots abandoned that view.
But I also think we have some opportunistic individuals, some sort of lone wolf elements.
Jeff Fort is perhaps the most notorious movement member. The former leader of a violent Chicago street gang, he was convicted in 1987 of conspiring with Libya's Gaddafi regime to blow up U.S. government buildings.
It's kind of a public relations nightmare. The vast majority of Moorish communities in America are not involved in any of this sovereign citizen ideology, not involved in fraudulent behavior, not involved in criminal acts.
As for Butler, he eventually abandoned the Bethesda mansion, but he still faces charges of burglary, theft, and fraud. He's currently out on bond.
You know, everybody likes to look at a big, beautiful house, but usually you call a realtor to unlock the door for you.
For CBS This Morning, Chip Reed, Washington.
This is from the New York Times. It's an article entitled, "She Brought Her Dream Home, Then Sovereign Moors Changed the Locks." It's published September 26th, and it's by Sarah Maslin-Neer. On June 16th, Shanita Little came to inspect her dream home. She had closed on it in February and was planning renovations before moving in. She graduated from the University of Central Florida but struggled as a young adult, living out of motel rooms for periods of time. Now a senior customer service specialist with Jaguar Land Rover North America, she could afford to buy a house. She tried to unlock the door but was puzzled. The locks had been replaced. The next day she returned with a locksmith. It was confronted by two men, one of whom was Hubert A. John of Los Angeles, who said the house was his. After a heated exchange, she called the police. When the police arrived, both Miss Little and Mr. John showed documents claiming the house was theirs, according to a report of the incident issued by Brian A. O'Hara, the Newark Public Safety Director. She shared the property deed providing ownership. The men, quote, claimed to be sovereign citizens of the Al Moroccan Empire and that their status permitted them access to the property, Mr. O'Hara report said. The officers verified that Miss Little bought the house in February and they asked the men to leave. They did. 30 minutes later, Mr. John returned, brushed past Miss Little on the porch, and opened the door with his own key and locked it behind him. When Miss Little called the police a second time, they returned with a SWAT team. So that was just a small portion of that bigger article. I had the link in there in the video. I encourage people to read the entire article because it is fascinating with respect to what people will do to take a house that's theirs. I mean, you know, can you imagine You just bought a house and you go to move in and somebody has claimed it as their own. It is really something that is quite stunning. Nowhere near as dangerous as this incident that happened on the highway there, I-95, which, by the way, here is an article. This is a YouTube video. Again, the local affiliate, this time it is the ABC affiliate. And they give an update sort of about this gentleman.
This building here in Providence is where, until a couple of years ago, this group used to meet. Now, the father of the group's leader tells me that not even he understands all of his son's ideas, but he says he knows what's in his heart. This is how Jamal Tabib Abdullah Bey's family knows him, as a new father with a young daughter, not as the leader of an armed group that faced off for nearly 9 hours last Saturday with state police on I-95.
My son is a kind person. He doesn't have any ill will. He's not a terrorist.
Stephen Latimer says his son served for 4 years as a communication specialist in the Marines, then worked in computers. A few years ago, he changed his last name to Bey when he joined a group called Rise of the Moors.
Our vehicle is full of camping equipment, which supports what I said about how we're going to our private land to train.
During the standoff, Bey took to social media saying his group was headed to Maine for training and had pulled over to the side of the highway to refuel one of their vehicles.
I am thankful for the Massachusetts State Police for their patience in seeing it through, and thankful that it didn't go and turn another way, because that was my biggest fear.
Eventually, Bey, 9 other men, and a 17-year-old boy surrendered without incident. Police say they found 8 guns, including 3 AR-15 rifles. They say none of the men had a firearms license. While waiting for the men to go to court, Bey's father says people should avoid jumping to conclusions.
I know they don't promote violence. At least he doesn't.
Latimer says his son is one of the 3 men taken to the hospital after the standoff for what police called pre-existing conditions. Latimer says he knows of no such condition for his son. Live in Providence, David Beanick, WCVB News Center 5.
So, and it's important to remind, and I probably should have said this at the top, is that there are Moors that don't believe in this. The Moors are a real group, and they're real people, Moroccan people, and they are not a part of this Rise of the Moors. Rise of the Moors is a very specific group that, as I indicated here, according to Southern Poverty Law Center, they are they're a creation in America, as far as I can understand. They're not actual Moroccans. They believe their heritage is. They believe all African Americans are. In addition, they are a group that were founded in the 90s. Moors, the real Moroccans, those people have been around for, and they've been here, become American citizens, and they're not involved in this. This is something that was created, I think, on Facebook or on social media or on, any number of different online places, and they have been the ones who have been really responsible for pushing this whole idea of the Moors and this whole idea of rising up and taking people's property because you have some ancestral claim that goes back 100+ years, that you have diplomatic immunity because you say you're a Moor. So very different from the actual Moors that we know and that are, as indicated in this one piece, that don't want to have anything to do with this Moor situation. So fascinating article. I don't know if we'll see more of this or if this thing is going to go away. I hope it does. Black people got a lot of issues going on. We don't need additional ones like this.